Good morning, my name is Sam Epstein. I will be conducting my final project for Intro to Ethics on abortion. I will start off by providing some general information for you. Abortion can be defined as the deliberate termination of a pregnancy. Depending on when an abortion is performed, the procedure will result in the death of a zygote, embryo, or fetus. Abortions can be performed either surgically or medically. The most common form is a surgical abortion. This is where a thin plastic tube enters the woman's uterus and suctions the embryo or fetus out of the uterine lining with a vacuum pump. A medical non-surgical abortion occurs when a woman takes a prescribed drug or mix of drugs that work to expel the embryo or fetus from the uterus. Prior to 1973, it was up to the individual states whether or not to permit abortions. From the years 1973 to 2022, the United States Supreme Court ruled that a woman has the constitutional right to an abortion during the first 2 trimesters. Abortions in the 3rd trimester were left up to the states. The United States Supreme Court's reasoning was that the Constitution includes a right to privacy. Therefore, this right to privacy extends to a woman's choice to terminate her pregnancy. In the year 2022, on June 24th, the United States Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade, giving the decision on whether to permit abortions back to the states. Today, abortion is illegal in some states and legal in others. Justices looked at viability as the crucial point at which state lawmakers may intervene to place restrictions on abortion access. They saw the end of the 2nd trimester as when a fetus might be able to survive outside of the womb. According to the World Health Organization, around 73 million induced abortions take place each year worldwide. Approximately 6 out of 10 of all unintended pregnancies end in induced abortion. The debate focuses on the concept of personhood. Fetuses and infants differ in their degree of personhood. These involve traits such as self-awareness, ability to reason, and the capacity for communication. Fetuses lack these cognitive abilities. Therefore, fetuses don't have the same moral status as infants. Infants are able to perform these functions to a certain degree. The argument from personhood. If a being is not a person, then it lacks any moral rights. Fetuses aren't persons, therefore, fetuses lack moral rights. If a being lacks moral rights, then it is morally acceptable to treat it in any way we like, including killing it. Therefore, it is morally acceptable to kill fetuses. The problem with this argument is that infants are not people, they are not rational, and they are not self-aware. If the argument from personhood is sound, and abortion is morally okay, then one could make the argument that so too is infanticide. The dependence argument. Fetuses are dependent on the mother's body, whereas infants are not. A person has the right to control what happens to their body. This would include making the decision to terminate a pregnancy. Once a fetus matures into an infant, it is no longer dependent on the mother's body. The mother now does not have the right to harm the infant. Killing versus letting die. There is a moral difference between killing and letting die. Killing an entity that holds a certain moral status is morally worse than letting it die. The fetus is not yet a person. Terminating a pregnancy is morally permissible, while killing an infant is morally impermissible. Is a fetus a human being? The argument from humanity. If the fetus is an innocent human being, then abortion is always, or perhaps almost always, immoral. The fetus is an innocent human being. Therefore, abortion is always, or perhaps almost always, immoral. The human fetus is a living, growing organism with its own genetic makeup. The fetus is innocent of any wrongdoing and cannot act immorally. The fetus is not a moral agent, one who is capable of understanding right and wrong, then acting on that basis of understanding. The problem with this argument is that the term human being is very ambiguous, and it's very open to debate. The argument from potential. If the fetus has the potential to be a person, then it has the same moral status as a person. Most fetuses have the potential to be a person, therefore, most fetuses have the same moral status as a person. A person's moral status includes having a broad set of fundamental rights, including the right to life, or the right to not be killed. Therefore, most fetuses have a broad set of fundamental rights, including the right to life. If a fetus has a right to life, then aborting is immoral. Therefore, in most cases, abortion is immoral. The argument from potential. Though some fetuses are lost due to miscarriage, most fetuses will grow to be healthy infants. They will eventually turn into persons, like both you and me. We have a set of basic moral rights that protect our interests and choices, including the right to life, which means the fetus has a right to life. Infanticide argument. If infanticide is immoral, so too is abortion. Infanticide is immoral, therefore abortion is immoral. It's wrong to deliberately kill infants. Even an hour does not make a difference in the moral status of a being. It's wrong to kill a newborn. It would seem wrong to kill the fetus 1 hour prior to birth. At that point, the fetus has all the same features as the newborn, except for the location of where it is, in the hospital room versus in the mother's womb. On the Moral and Legal Status of Abortion by Mary Ann Warren. She holds a pro-choice position that abortion is always morally permissible. Persons have rights. Fetuses are not persons, but only potential persons. Rights of persons always morally outweigh the rights of potential persons. Warren does not believe that fetuses are persons. She defends this position by identifying 5 criteria of personhood. These include consciousness, ability to reason, self-motivated activity, capacity to communicate, and self-awareness. A being who lacks all 5 of these traits cannot qualify as a person, and the fetuses lack all 5. Do these justifications ultimately succeed? In my opinion, these justifications ultimately fail in making a moral distinction between fetuses and infants. For the concept of personhood, are cognitive abilities the only or best basis for moral status? Also, can't some animals or even artificial intelligence possess some of these abilities to a certain extent? Some problems with the dependence argument, in my opinion. Many people are dependent on medical treatment, medication, or assistance of others to survive. Does this mean these people aren't people either? It is also difficult to determine how much dependence is necessary to warrant a lower moral status. Is a fetus a person from the moment of conception? I will include opinions by Judith Thomson in my answers. Some philosophers argue that a fetus is a person from the moment of conception. This is based on the idea that human life begins at conception, and the fetus has a right to life that should be protected. Thomson argues that the question of whether a fetus is a person is not relevant to the moral permissibility of abortion. Thomson also argues that a woman's right to bodily autonomy also has moral weight. Other philosophers argue that a fetus may become a person at some point during pregnancy, but not necessarily at conception. Pro-life versus pro-choice stance. The pro-life stance. The fetus becomes a person with moral standing at the moment of conception. It must have the same rights as any other person. The pro-choice stance. Fetus does not become a person until it possesses certain capacities. Thomson, in A Defense of Abortion, makes the argument against the idea that a fetus is a person from the moment of conception. Even if we agree that a fetus is a person, the woman still has the right to choose whether or not to carry the fetus to term. She used the analogy of a famous violinist to make her point. The violinist analogy. Suppose you wake up one morning to find that you have been kidnapped and attached to a famous violinist who needs your blood to survive. You do not consent to this, but you are now responsible for keeping the violinist alive. Thomson argued that even if we grant the violinist is a person with a right to life, you still have the right to disconnect from him and refuse to give him your blood, even if this results in his death. Women still have the right to control her own body and make decisions about what happens to it. Even if we grant that the fetus is a person, that is not enough to show her that the fetus is entitled to the mother's resources, aka her body. She is inclined to think that the fetus has already become a human person well before birth. By the 10th week, the fetus has a face, arms and legs, fingers and toes, internal organs, and brain activity is detectable. On the other hand, she believes that a newly fertilized ovum or a newly implanted clump of cells is no more person than an acorn is on an oak tree. My personal opinion. Human life has intrinsic value and should be protected from the moment of conception. Moment of conception marks the beginning of a unique human life with its own genetic identity and potential for growth and development. Denying personhood to a fetus could cause damage to other vulnerable populations such as people with disabilities. I believe that human life should be protected from the earliest stages of development. What conclusions should we draw about the moral status of abortion? Most who share my view about a fetus would view abortion as morally impermissible, except in cases where the life of the mother is at risk. They believe that intentionally ending the life of a fetus is equal to murder. Those who believe that a fetus is not a person until it reaches a certain stage of development typically view abortion as morally permissible. They believe that a woman has the right to make decisions about her own body. This right may sometimes override the right to life of the fetus. I am conflicted on what specifically I believe. I believe that a fetus is not a person until it leaves the mother's body. However, I believe that it has a right to life from the very start of conception. I also believe strongly in women deciding what happens to their own body. John Noonan on why abortion should not be permissible. He makes three main arguments. 1. Since the fetus has the potential to be a mature human being, then it has the same moral status as you or I. It is always wrong to kill an innocent human being, except perhaps in self-defense. A fetus is an innocent human being. Therefore, it is wrong to kill a fetus except in self-defense. There is no moment prior to birth where one can identify the point at which the fetus acquires a right to life. Since newborns have a right to life, so too do embryos. Distinctions. The fetus is not viable. It cannot be removed from the mother's womb and live apart from her. Therefore, the life of the fetus is dependent on the life of the mother. 2. A being who has had more experience, lived longer, who possesses memories, is more human than one who has not. 3. If a fetus dies, the grief of the parents is not the grief they would have for a living child. Since the fetus is not capable of communicating with others, thus both subjectively and objectively it is not a member of the society. Noonan's argument. He argues that the controversy over when a fetus is considered a living being supports the view that abortion is killing an innocent life. Newborns have a right to life, which strengthens the argument against abortions. The fact that a fetus cannot survive outside of the womb is presented as a reason to oppose abortion, as it would be taking away the fetus of its life support. It could also be seen as a counter-argument in favor of abortion, as it acknowledges the mother's crucial role in supporting the life of the fetus and her right to make decisions based on her own beliefs and values. The dependency of the fetus on the mother is a complex factor that must be taken into account when considering the moral status of abortion. Care is an essential part of a healthy upbringing for both fetuses and children. Neglect can result in the death of a fetus or child, just as surely as a fetus detached from the mother. In the case of a pregnancy resulting from rape, it may be emotionally difficult for the mother to provide the newborn with the necessary care. Adoption is often the solution in these cases, but it may fail to provide the child with the affection and care they need, particularly if they have health issues. Many children in the adoption system fail to find a permanent home, which sets them up for a difficult life once they turn 18. Abortion may be the most moral option in cases where it can prevent a child from growing up without a home. Correct distinction. Since a fetus is not capable of communicating with others, thus both subjectively and objectively, it is not a member of the society. This is a valid distinction. Not only is a fetus unable to communicate, but it is also physically not present. If an individual has not even been born yet, how could someone consider them a member of the society? For example, if a fetus is considered a member of society, then it should receive its citizenship the day an embryo matures into a fetus. In the United States Constitution, it clearly states, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. Thank you for listening. This marks the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed.